If you've ever watched Petticoat Junction, you probably noticed something strange right away. Those three sisters kept changing. First there was one Billy Joe, then another. Suddenly Bobby Joe had a new face, too. Just when viewers got used to one version of the characters, another actress would take over. It was confusing, even a little unsettling. For years, fans shrugged it off, assuming it was due to scheduling conflicts or creative changes. But the real reason the main characters kept leaving went much deeper than anyone expected. Behind the smiles and small-town charm were personal struggles, career battles, and decisions that completely changed the course of the show. Once you know the full story, you'll never look at Petticoat Junction the same way again. At the heart of the series was one steady, comforting presence, Kate Bradley, played by Bea Benaderet. She was the no-nonsense, big-hearted mother who ran the shady rest hotel and kept her three daughters and Uncle Joe from spiraling into chaos. For many viewers, she was the emotional center of the show. So when Kate started appearing less and less in later seasons, fans were confused. And then suddenly she was gone. What most viewers didn't know at the time was that Bea Benaderet had been privately battling lung cancer. Diagnosed in the mid-1960s, she continued filming as long as she could, even while undergoing radiation treatment. At first, producers adjusted her shooting schedule and limited her scenes. But as her health declined, she was written out of several episodes entirely. With her absence barely explained on screen, behind the scenes, there was a quiet understanding that Bea's condition was serious. But the studio chose not to publicly address it. There were whispers in the press, but no official statement. In an especially uncomfortable move, the writers even introduced a temporary mother figure, Dr. Janet Craig, played by June Lockhart, before Bea had passed away. The decision felt premature, and some cast members were reportedly upset by how quickly the show seemed to move on. Bea Benaderet passed away in October 1968 at the age of 62. When news of her death broke, fans were devastated. The show tried to continue without her, but her absence was impossible to ignore. The warmth and balance she brought to the screen simply couldn't be replaced, and her passing left more than just an emotional gap. It marked the end of the show's true heart. It created a ripple effect across the entire cast, because without Bea, everything started to unravel. When Petticoat Junction first hit television screens in 1963, Jeanine Riley lit up the set as Billy Joe Bradley, the oldest of the three sisters. She had the looks, the charm, and just enough sass to make her stand out. Viewers quickly grew attached to her performance, and it seemed like she was made for the role. So when she disappeared after just 2 seasons, fans were left scratching their heads. Why would someone walk away from a hit show at its peak? The truth was that Jeanine Riley never really felt at home in the part. While audiences saw her as the vibrant blonde on a sunny sitcom, she had more serious ambitions behind the scenes. She had trained as a dramatic actress and wanted roles with more depth, gritty, challenging characters that allowed her to stretch her talent. Playing a small-town beauty with limited development was not the career she had in mind. It wasn't just about creative dissatisfaction. Reports from the time suggested Riley was also clashing with producers over the direction of her character. There were disagreements about how Billy Joe was being written. Some insiders claimed she was uncomfortable with how one-dimensional the character had become, while others hinted at ongoing frustrations with the way the women on the show were portrayed in general. Riley reportedly pushed for better material, but the response she received was lukewarm at best. During the 1960s, actresses had little say in how their roles evolved. Many were hired for their looks first and their talent second. For Jeanine, who had studied theater and hoped to do more meaningful work, being boxed into a glamorous farm girl role felt limiting. She was ambitious and knew that staying too long in a role like that could hurt her chances of breaking into film or serious television dramas. Behind the scenes, her dissatisfaction grew, and the tension became harder to ignore. By the end of season 2, Jeanine made the decision to leave. It was not dramatic or scandalous, but it was definitive. She packed up and moved on, hoping to take on projects that offered more range and artistic respect. The studio, of course, did not want to lose Billy Joe, so instead of writing the character out, they simply recast her. Enter actress number 2, Gunilla Hutton, who stepped in without much explanation. But Ganila's run would not last long either, because just one season later, Petticoat Junction would find itself looking for yet another Billy Joe, and the revolving door would keep on spinning. While Billy Joe was the show's glamorous big sister, Bobby Joe was the soft-spoken bookworm, the sweetheart of the trio. For the show's earliest fans, Pat Woodell was Bobby Joe. Her gentle voice, thoughtful expressions, and wholesome charm gave the character a quiet strength that made her stand out, even among louder personalities. But much like her co-star Janine Riley, Pat's time on Petticoat Junction was surprisingly brief. After just 2 seasons, she was gone. Her exit received little attention at the time. No farewell episode, no dramatic send-off, just another replacement stepping into the role, almost as if nothing had changed. The real reason behind Pat Woodell's departure tells a very different story, one rooted less in television and more in music. Pat had dreams of becoming a singer, and music was her true passion. During her time on Petticoat Junction, she occasionally performed musical numbers, sometimes alongside the other sisters in skits and short songs. But the show's format and writing didn't give her the freedom or spotlight she craved, and she felt creatively stifled. After her second season, she made the bold decision to walk away and pursue a full-time career in music. What followed was a sincere, if challenging, attempt to break into the industry. Pat recorded singles and toured as part of a girl group called the Ladybugs, a 4-member act styled as a female parody of the Beatles. They even appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, wearing mop-top wigs and matching outfits while singing light-hearted tunes. It was a clever gimmick that gained attention, but did not launch the long-term career she had hoped for. Still, Pat remained committed. She later signed with Warner Brothers Records and released a solo album, which struggled commercially. Though her voice was warm and technically strong, the market was already saturated with rising pop stars, and her image was still tied to her sweet, small-town persona. Breaking out of the TV girl box proved harder than expected. Even so, Pat never publicly regretted leaving Petticoat Junction. She had followed her passion, even when it meant walking away from fame. In later interviews, she spoke warmly about her time on the show, but clearly saw it as a stepping stone, not a destination. Eventually, she stepped away from the spotlight altogether. In the 1980s, Pat retired from acting and music completely, spending the rest of her life focused on humanitarian causes and charitable work, far from the cameras but still making an impact. As always, the producers responded by recasting the role. Laurie Saunders took over as Bobby Joe and stayed for the remainder of the series. But viewers could sense a shift. Something about the dynamic had changed, and behind the scenes, the pressure on replacement actresses was only beginning. By the middle of Petticoat Junction's run, the show's original magic had begun to fade. Audiences might not have noticed at first, but the heart of the series, the chemistry between the 3 Bradley sisters, was being held together by one replacement after another. Nowhere was the pressure more intense than on Laurie Saunders and Meredith McCrae. Laurie stepped in as the 3rd Bobby Joe after Pat Woodell's quiet departure. She brought a different energy, bubblier, more outgoing, and far less reserved than her predecessor. The producers leaned into this, writing Bobby Joe as more ditzy and comedic. For loyal fans who loved Pat's quieter, thoughtful version, the change felt jarring. Laurie did her best to fill the role and stayed committed for the remainder of the series, but she often faced behind-the-scenes comparisons and pressure to lighten the character in ways that clashed with her instincts. What made things harder was how visible those changes were to the audience. In many sitcoms, character swaps happened quietly, but on Petticoat Junction, the sisters were central to every episode. Fans noticed immediately when a new actress arrived. Laurie had to walk a fine line, keeping Bobby Joe recognizable while making the character her own. It was a no-win situation, and she later admitted that taking over the part came with an unspoken expectation to be someone she wasn't. Then came Meredith McCrae, perhaps the most memorable Billy Joe for many longtime viewers. She was the 3rd actress to play the role after Janine Riley and Gunilla Hutton. By the time she arrived, the revolving door of actresses had become a running joke among fans, but Meredith brought stability. Smart, poised, and naturally confident, she helped ground the show in its later years. Yet her experience was not without frustrations. Meredith reportedly clashed with the production team over creative direction, seeking more meaningful storylines, stronger character development, and fewer recycled plots. By the late 1960s, scripts had become formulaic, leaving little room for growth, which left Meredith feeling creatively stuck. Her background added to the pressure. Meredith came from a Hollywood family. Her father was Gordon McCrae of Oklahoma and Carousel, and her mother, Sheila McCrae, was a Broadway and television performer. Growing up in show business, Meredith had high expectations for her work and wasn't shy about pushing for better material. While admirable, her passion sometimes rubbed producers the wrong way. Behind the scenes, it was clear she wanted more than just a pretty face on a train platform. Adding to the challenge was the constant audience expectation that new sisters fit seamlessly into roles crafted by other actresses. Meredith and Laurie were not just performing, they were maintaining continuity, honoring the original portrayals, and keeping viewers invested, all while the show itself was beginning to lose steam. Eventually, Meredith chose to leave after season 7. It was a quiet but firm decision. She wanted more serious roles and knew staying on a declining show would not advance her career. Her departure marked a turning point. The cast had been reshuffled so many times that even loyal fans began to feel disconnected from the show's original charm. While the characters on screen kept smiling, the reality behind the scenes was far more complicated. Through it all, only one main character had remained from the very beginning: Uncle Joe. Through all the casting changes, character swaps, and shifting storylines, one figure remained constant: Uncle Joe, played by Edgar Buchanan. He was the lovable schemer, the comic relief, and in many ways, the show's unexpected anchor. While the actresses playing the Bradley sisters came and went, and even Kate Bradley herself was tragically written out, Uncle Joe was still there, lounging in his favorite chair at the Shady Rest and cooking up his next get-rich-quick scheme. Edgar Buchanan's continued presence was not just about screen time, it was deeply personal. He had been close friends with Bea Bonaderet for years, even before Petticoat Junction began, having worked together on The Beverly Hillbillies. Their off-screen friendship added real warmth to their on-screen chemistry as Kate and Uncle Joe. When Bea's health started to decline, Edgar was one of the few cast members who knew the full extent of her illness. Her death in 1968 hit him hard, but despite the emotional toll, he stayed on the show. Some say he felt a sense of loyalty to Bea, to the fans, and to the role itself, while others close to the production suggested that Edgar had grown deeply disillusioned with the direction the show was taking. After Bea's death, the writers gradually shifted the spotlight onto Uncle Joe to keep viewers engaged, but the tone had changed. What had once been a wholesome, ensemble-driven series began to feel more like a patchwork of gags and last-minute fixes. Uncle Joe was never meant to carry the show. He worked best as a foil, a wild card who stirred up trouble while Kate kept things grounded. Without her, Edgar's character began to lose definition. Scripts leaned heavily on his comedy, sometimes pushing him into exaggerated territory that even Buchanan found frustrating. He reportedly made subtle objections, but with the show already in decline, there was little he could do. Off-camera, Edgar was also dealing with his own health issues. In his late 60s, during the show's final years, the long hours and repetitive storylines took their toll. Crew members noticed he seemed more tired and less talkative, but he kept showing up, always on time, always professional. He understood the show needed at least one familiar face to hold things together, and he never wanted to let the audience down. By the final season, the weariness was visible. His performance, once full of sharp timing and sly humor, had grown heavier and more mechanical, but fans still appreciated his presence. In many ways, he was the last link to the show's golden years. And while his loyalty helped hold things together on screen, it could not stop what was coming. Outside the studio walls, CBS had made a decision that would change everything. By the early 1970s, a quiet storm was brewing inside the network, one that would sweep away some of its most beloved shows in one fell swoop. Petticoat Junction was still airing, but the writing was on the wall. Ratings were slipping, the cast had been overhauled multiple times, and even the most loyal viewers were beginning to feel the show had lost its way. The real blow, however, came not from the audience, but from the network itself. In what would later be called the Rural Purge, CBS decided to cancel nearly all of its rural-themed programming in favor of more urban, socially conscious shows aimed at a younger, city-dwelling demographic. Executives believed advertisers wanted affluent metropolitan viewers, not middle American families watching lighthearted farm comedies. Almost overnight, shows like Green Acres, The Beverly Hillbillies, and Petticoat Junction were quietly taken off the schedule. What made it sting even more was that Petticoat Junction was still pulling decent numbers and had loyal fans, but none of that mattered. The show simply did not fit the new image CBS wanted to project. The cast felt the shift even before the official cancellations. Scripts became weaker, episodes were cobbled together from recycled plot lines, and the writing staff was reduced. There was no longer any real effort to develop meaningful story arcs or deepen the characters. Several insiders said it felt like the show was being set up to fail. By the final season, the energy was gone. Meredith McCrae had exited, B. Bonaderet had passed, and even Edgar Buchanan's scenes were scaled back. New characters were introduced in last-ditch attempts to spark interest, but it only confused viewers more. The heart of the show, the family bond at the Shady Rest Hotel, had been hollowed out. Then, without any real closure or farewell episode, CBS announced the cancellation. Just like that, Petticoat Junction was over. There was no reunion special, no retrospective, no goodbye tour. For a show that had once been one of CBS's crown jewels, its ending felt surprisingly cold. Yet what made Petticoat Junction endure for so long was not just its setting or its storylines, but its cast. A group of talented, passionate actors who gave it their all even when the deck was stacked against them. On the surface, the show was a cozy, cheerful sitcom about small-town life, giving viewers comfort, laughs, and warmth week after week. Behind that charm, however, was a show constantly struggling to stay afloat. Actors came and went, studio decisions clashed with personal dreams, and the loss of one beloved star left a hole that never truly healed. B. Bonaderet's passing marked the beginning of the unraveling. Her presence had grounded the show, and without her, everything else began to shift. Janine Riley left to pursue serious acting. Pat Waddell walked away to follow her music dreams, and Meredith McCrae and Laurie Saunders tried to keep the momentum going, facing the impossible task of filling roles fans had already attached themselves to. Through it all, Edgar Buchanan stayed on out of loyalty. Even as the spark behind the camera faded, in the end, it was not just the actors who left, it was the soul of the show. The network's shift in priorities, the constant cast changes, and the refusal to let characters grow all took a toll. When the final episode aired, it felt less like a conclusion and more like a quiet disappearance. Yet, despite all its struggles, Petticoat Junction still occupies a cherished spot in television history. It offered early opportunities to rising stars, brought families together around the TV screen, and created characters that continue to resonate with fans even decades later. But now the story behind those ever-changing characters becomes clear. It wasn't just television business as usual. Behind the laughter and sunny small-town scenes, it was personal, emotional, and far messier than viewers could ever have imagined. The revolving door of cast changes, the clashes of ambition and loyalty, and the pressures from both network and circumstance all shaped a show that, on the surface, seemed simple, but in truth, was layered with real human drama.